Because if we support everything, then what animal will be left for us to be allowed to eat? I think I figured some things out. Here's my explanation. So with every person, there are a couple of levels of interaction with the environment. There is I, which they would always like to see going in an upward trajectory, gaining more, having more. There's we, who, in order to protect I, there needs to be a system, some sort of support group that justifies I's continued existence. And so we is also added to this continued growth, to this continued gain. This continued growth and this continued gain is a nest. And this nest will always attempt to stay separate from they. And they is pretty much everything else. We'll add another layer here. We'll say animals. We'll say animal here. We'll say the animals. So, I and we will always attempt to maintain a separate identity from everything else, because if not, the fear is that eventually we will no longer be allowed to eat an animal by having to support everything that exists. And so, as I and we go up, as they are discussed, they are always losing, and it's always their fault that they're losing. They are always causing the loss. Regular mindset. Now, according to every single point of view, I here and we have to be fair to them, which is they, while they are playing tricks. It's the whole relationship that we all seem to have with the environment. We're doing it right, I'm doing it right, but they keep doing it wrong, and it's causing problems. And then the animals. What's up with the animals? And so we can explain language separation as the attempt to stay separate, the attempt to maintain a separate identity from the environment, creating the gap that allows for separation of language. They speak I up, they speak we up, but they are always going down, as fair as you can make it. And it's this mindset that is establishing the language separation. Now, as it goes, I and we have to be as fair to they as we want whatever it is we're all facing to be as fair to us. So, as I and we develop a nest, this nest establishes separation of belief, separation of strategy, separation of identity. And even if every single person is saying the same thing, no, you're not. You're they. You aren't saying the same thing I am. You're a part of they. You can't be a part of we. The trick to beating all of this, including the language separation, is that whenever you're asked to actually speak a language, to speak by its rules, by its etiquette, understand that most languages are separated with the intention of dragging those outside of that language down. And so by speaking with the trajectory of I, we, and they all going upwards, you can actually defeat language. Whereas separation of language is pulling things downward. By attempting to cooperate with everything, you increase cooperation, and language does not exist without cooperation. And whereas the limit of language is also at a restriction, at a loss, by higher cooperation, you can increase language and thus express the environment differently. And so at any given moment, there are people constantly speaking in a way in which they are gaining and everything else is losing. That is separation. Speaking in a way in which everything is winning adds to this supposed limitation of language, increasing the boundaries of cooperation, which means that even if I'm not speaking within the rules of your language, by simply speaking against your attempt to separate downwards, I can still be understood on a near frequency level.